why this time we see the non-flooded area usually it is getting flooded, and people do not have that coping capacity to cope with.
Okay, non-flooded areas means how many such districts, if I may ask, just for the information?
The number of the districts are almost it was 33 at one point of time, but in some of the pockets, like we are working in an area called Kanpur, which is usually a non-vulnerable area. The whole area is being cut up from all the angle. No connectivity, no roadway facilities right now. People do not have even boats to transport. It is like a situation within crisis, and they do not have that orientation how to cope with situation like flood. And in all the districts, I think there are districts like Bojali, then Dorong. Usually, the non-flooded areas are people are experiencing a lot. They are suffering a lot with the impact, with the widespread destruction.
I just see my colleague, and friend Vishal. Hi Vishal, how are you? Seeing you after a long time.
One second, sir. He's not able to speak.
Vishal?
Hi, sir. How are you, sir? It's a long time.
Yeah.
How are you, sir?
Good. And yes. Where are you located right now? Are you?
I'm in Raipur, sir, Chhattisgarh.
Okay. I thought you may be traveling to Assam.
No, sir. We have requested them. We have offered them that in surge capacity we can come. But right now, our colleague Anand is able to manage that. Anand Kunu is a DRR officer there, and he is also the person who will speak in this panel also.
Yeah.
So he has done many things, many initiatives he has taken. So, and we have seen that today when you are coming to, so like I could not resist that I should be in this meeting.
Good.
Hi, good afternoon, sir. This is Basab.
Hi, good afternoon, Basab.
After a long time, sir.
So yeah, as we are having Basab sir also with us, so without wasting time, I think we should get into the agenda of this meeting.
Yes, sure.
We'll just call up.
Siljo, with your permission, that since one was seeing some friends, so I couldn't resist the temptation of saying hello to them.
No, not a problem, sir. So this is the platform wherein we bring all these people who haven't interacted since a long time. So this is the platform for you guys to catch up. But as we are running short of time, maybe we can have interaction time at the end of the session. So I'll just call up the moderator for the day, my manager Nupur Tyagi. So she'll be taking us throughout the session. Over to you, Nupur.
Well, I thought right now we are in time, not much out of time. Maybe a couple of minutes, but later on will depend on Nupur, how she commands and coordinates.
We will stay on time, and we will make sure that we have plenty of time for the interaction, question and answers as well.
Yeah.
So a very good afternoon to all. I'm Nupur Tyagi. I'm Program Manager of Knowledge and Capacity Sharing Vertical with Sphere India. And on behalf of Sphere India, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you who have joined us today for this very important webinar on flood situation in India, where we'll be discussing about the current status, emerging needs, response strategies of various organizations, and pathways for way forward. So as we know that floods are the most common natural disasters in India, be it 2005 Mumbai floods or the ongoing situation in Assam. And India has faced many water-related catastrophes over the years, and climate change has also evidently played its role in escalating these events, making floods a recurrent phenomenon throughout the country. And it continues to cause events of damage to livelihood systems, poverty, infrastructure, public utilities, along with loss of lives. So in current scenario, we are seeing that many states in India are experiencing torrential rainfalls, and floods and landslides triggered by this rainfall has also deepened the crisis, particularly in the northeast, with more deaths and devastation being reported in Assam, or recently saw in Manipur, Meghalaya, as well as Arunachal Pradesh. While the government has been engaged in evacuation, opening of relief camps, distribution centers, and providing relief to the affected communities, large number of NGOs are also responding in these states. So with the panel that we have today, that we are confident that in today's discussion, we'll be able to identify the needs of the affected people and explore all possible channels for collaborations for a robust preparedness and response to the ongoing as well as the emerging emergencies with the onset of monsoon. So to review the status of floods in India, focusing on states like Assam and the nearby states, we will take this discussion forward, and we hope that from this discussion we are able to identify some priority actions that can be taken up by various stakeholders for enhanced response strategy. So before welcoming our speakers for the day, I'd like to let everyone know that we'll be having a question and answer round towards the end. And I request all of the participants to share their questions specific to speakers in the chat, which we will continue to monitor and will be taking it up in the end of the session. So with that, I would like to welcome and invite our panelists who have joined us for this discussion. We have Shri Anil Kumar Sinha, who is the founder vice chairperson of BSTFA, and he has established the ethos of the organization and lending it vision, goals, and leadership. And also as the Joint Secretary in charge of disaster management with the Government of India, he has handled major disasters, be it Odisha super cyclone, Bhuj earthquake, among others. And he's also been the founding member of the NIDM at national level, and also at global level, he's been founding member of International Recovery Platform with UNDP at Kobe, Japan. And we are also joined by Mr. Basab Sarkar, who started his professional development career in 1993 and has worked with organizations like CASA, Concern Worldwide, Save the Children, ADRA. And currently he's based at Kolkata, working with Oxfam as a humanitarian program coordinator in Humanitarian Hub since January 2015. He's also worked in Kosi flood, Cyclone Idea, Cyclone Pali, Assam conflict, Cyclone Pani, Kerala response, Cyclone Amphan, as well as Cyclone Yas, and also responded to COVID-19 across 16 states. And shortly, we'll also be joined by Mr. Anand Kanu, who is working with UNICEF as Program Officer for DRR, who is responsible for leading the risk-informed programming, emergency preparedness, and DRR portfolio of UNICEF in the Northeast region. He's also worked in different geographies and thematically led climate-induced losses and damage, along with multi-level, multi-setting disaster management planning, humanitarian and development linkages, innovation in DRR, school safety, risk-informed Gram Panchayat development plan, and similar areas in various capacities. We also have Mr. Nivnaren Nampal, Senior Manager Northeast with World Vision India, who's done his MBA specialized in rural development and human resources. He has 20 years of work experience in various capacities, providing leadership in World Vision India projects like health and nutrition, community resilience in Dehradun, Rajasthan, Delhi, Mizoram, and Assam. And he's also supervising UNICEF Poshan Abhiyan in Assam and has worked in various development projects in the northern corner of the country. And we also have with us Mr. Tirtha Prasad Saikia, who will be representing IAG Assam in today's platform. He's a frontline development activist and associated with a wide range of community-based interventions. He is also the joint director of the Northeast Affected Area Development Society, NEEDS, a local organization working with poor people in their struggle against humanitarian crisis, exploitation, and poverty based in the state of Assam. And Mr. Tirtha is also working closely with several networks and coalitions at local, national, as well as international level in the field of humanitarian aid, disaster management, climate change, environment, and development justice. So a warm welcome to all our speakers, and I'd really like to take this opportunity to thank you for joining us. And with this, I would like to invite our first speaker of the day. We have Shri Anil Kumar Sinha. And so to initiate today's discussion, I would first like you to elaborate on some strategic interventions. Like, there are states in India like Assam and Bihar, which are amongst the country's most flood-prone areas, and they are experiencing some form of flooding every year, which affects millions of people. So with this context, what according to you could be some of the suggestive interventions by the government and relevant authorities that can support in realization of an anticipated flood management and preparedness, sir? Over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Nupur, and thank you, Siljo, and thanks to Sphere and all colleagues who are there. Namaste and good afternoon to all of you. Very happy that this very topical, and timely kind of a discussion has been organized by Sphere, and we already have very impressive number of participants in this event, you see. Now, Nupur has asked me to elaborate on some strategic issues, intervention, challenges, and all that. But little bit on the perspective, just to begin with. And at this stage, Nupur, can I take 4 or 5 minutes?
I'm sure, sir.
Yeah.
It will be good to have that.
Okay, friends. Now, talking of floods is, talking of one of the disasters which has been there practically eternally, since civilization. But of late, what we see that there's a changing nature of floods, which would also mean that there's a dynamic situation. There has to be dynamic planning, dynamic strategy, at all levels. You see, that is just an overall. You see, I'm not going to the statistics because some of these statistics have already been mentioned in the note which has been circulated and by our colleagues in Sphere. And a lot of these statistics are available, and I suppose our colleagues from Assam would be sharing, this situation along with certain statistics just to demonstrate what is the seriousness and the complexity of the situation. Now, I'll just like to, as I said, some general perspective. I have about 6-7 points. I will not elaborate, but just mention them at this stage. And I'm sure later on there will be occasion to elaborate on some of them. See, floods have been one of the most common, regular, recurrent kind of disasters in our country. And we have a history that right from 1947 we became independent. And from 1954 itself, there was National Flood Management Program was there, which was followed by a National Flood Commission for the integrated and scientific approach. Then there was National Commission on Water Resources, and then we came in 1999, and then we came in National Water Policy 2012, you see. Now, you see, Water Policy 2012, if I recall, was mainly guided by the fact that we had been realizing that there is too much of water and at the same time too little water, which means floods and droughts, happening together and in adjacent areas. And that is what we saw in Bihar very, very frequently. And we have, certain number of districts, 28 of them, which are flood prone, 15 are highly flood prone, and then there are others which are drought prone. And that kind of situation also exists in many other states, in the central India, Odisha, and other central Indian states, etc., etc. also. Now, while we were dealing with the rural, floods, then we came, not that the urban floods had not happened, but there has been increasing intensity and frequency of urban floods. And one of the major urban floods has been mentioned right in the beginning in the note of Sphere, that is Mumbai floods of 26 July 2005. And I remember personally, because then I used to work in Mumbai, you see, and I had faced that, and it was a very difficult situation, but I'm not going into the details of that. Only thing is that, unfortunately, 2015 and now almost say 20 years, another few years, it will be 20 years, but these recurrent floods are still happening. And still, even though the Bombay Municipal Corporation is a very powerful body, and yet, and they have been doing their work, and yet there's a lot of struggle about this. Now, at the same time, what we have found in recent years, Patna 1975, then Srinagar, Chennai, Bangalore, whichever, you pick up the urban prominent places, cities, etc. There we have found these incidences. One of the major findings has been that, water bodies, you see, in Chennai, I remember there used to be more than 300 or 360 water bodies. And at the time when these floods came, etc., then the statistics, which is stuck into my mind, that then we had just about 150 or so. So a lot of water bodies over the years have been lost. And same has been the situation all over India. In Bihar, we used to have a saying that pag pag par tal. Matlab, every step you had a talab, a water body, but all those things have, gone. Now, the other point is about the climate change, and climate change is playing its own part, a very vicious part, which makes the whole situation complex, affecting the patterns of rains, weather, and all kinds of things are happening. Winter has disappeared, heat waves have come, they are very, very much dominating. Now we are, currently facing again floods in Assam and some northern states. The next fourth point is about, the PRIs and the ULBs. I mentioned about the Mumbai Municipal Corporation, but I think in terms of strategizing, I think it's very, very important, despite the fact that after 2005, the National Act, the DM Act, passed by Parliament, and the NDMA, the SDMAs, and the DTMAs all over the country, without exception, every district. And yet we find that PRIs and ULBs have not been sufficiently, empowered. They don't enjoy sufficient delegations in terms of powers, and then the corresponding funds, devolution, etc., which is also affecting. So when we talk of 73rd, 74th Amendment and PRS and ULB, there is an institutional aspect about these bodies, but there is also the aspect that these are the bodies which connect with the people, be it urban areas or be it rural areas. So we will obviously be talking about the community participation and all that, but that is where I think the role of PRIs and ULBs and such bodies, they become very, very important to see. The next point is about the institutions, some key institutions, which will play a very important part in any strategy, like IMD, the India Meteorological Department, which comes out with the forecast of monsoon, and thereafter on regular basis, on regional basis, on long term, short term, medium term, those things. That is very, very important. And then we have this National Water Commission, Central Water Commission, which monitors the water level in all over the country in the rivers, you see. And then many other organizations which I mentioned, right from NDMA downwards. And at least let me tell you, about 20 departments are involved in the preparation for floods, in response to floods, in recovery from floods, etc. So they are very important. Now we have to keep, in terms of strategy, let me also talk of management versus control. Are we talking of flood management? I'm happy that the topic here is flood management. We have not mentioned flood control. But flood control has also been a dominant concept which has existed in our country in terms of policies and plans and programs, you see. And what has been found practically all over India, that there are views that flood control has not really succeeded. In fact, it has enhanced the proneness of a lot of areas to further floods. You see, so I think there is a big debate, and one has to understand the nuances of the management versus floods. There are many mechanisms for flood control which are well, conceived, and I'm not saying that all of them have to be ignored and all of them have to be demolished. But I think there has to be very balanced consideration between what consists management, what is control, where the two, complement each other, etc., etc. That is very, very important to see. Then taking it one step further, to see whether management or control, there are structural measures and then there are non-structural measures, you see. So I think that is something which is very important. I'm again not going into the details right now, but we'll get down to that. Next point, which is very important, and maybe the last 2 points, is the use of technology, right from IMD and the Central Water Commission to use of technology by any organization, be it even DDM, etc. I think that is very, very important. And Anand Bijeta, a colleague of mine, we have worked together. He is working on a project where Google with Red Cross, they are trying to disseminate this flood warning and alert system. And then last, if I may say, is the role of the community, which I mentioned along with the PRIs, but and ULVs, etc. also. But how far we are inclusive, how far our policies and programs are participative, how far the marginalized and the weaker sections and those who suffer more from the disasters, they are into this whole narrative and the discussions. I think these are the kinds of issues, Nupur, which I would say these 8, 9, if we go into exhaustively, there may be another 9, 10 points, but these are the major points which I flagged, which have a bearing on any policy or plans or the strategy which we have for flood management. So thank you. I'll stop at this point and then come back whenever you want. Thank you, Nupur.
Thank you so much, sir. I think the points that you have discussed, they have very well set the context for today's agenda, and especially talking about the dynamic evolution of flooding in the country or throughout the world and going into the nuances of it, and especially looking at the institutional linkages and how they can be utilized for effective response as well as preparedness. And I think that very well takes us to our next question, to our next speaker. Mr. Basab, my question to you would be, like, from your vast experience of responding to various major emergencies in the last few decades, can you shed some light on how, with the increasing frequency and intensity of disasters in the country, the needs and priorities have evolved for the humanitarian sector?
Thank you so much. Already, Anil Sirji already shared, Nupur, many areas which already covered, but still I feel that some of the areas we need to seriously act on ground. And if you see that 2005, the DM Act already we have developed in the countries. We have a climate change the policies in ground, but effectiveness of Disaster Management Act in ground, it's very much important. And if you see that, especially if you see that capacity building of that all levels, especially that community levels, even that officials like block level, district level, and state departments, that is very much important. That still there is a scope for improvement. And most important thing is that Anil Sirji already shared that prioritize that CCA and DRR by the states. If you see that Assam recurring flood is every year we are facing that severe floods. So very important that the state needs to be prioritized. Already ASDM is doing a very commendable job, but there are the areas we can jointly work for improve more effective and efficient disaster management as well as humanitarian response programs. So another is that in that CBDRR, community-based DRR, and that integration at local level and mainstreaming at state level is important. So if you see that NGO perspective, I have seen that many of the NGOs are practicing DRR in the field. But my opinion and my suggestions, the past experience, that harmonized model is missing, tools are missing. It can be easily, we can harmonize it through our platform like Intelligence Group. Even that state officials can help, even that Spear India and NDFA can help develop a common tools for all of us, so that it will be easy for integration in the all level, even that we can try to push for mainstreaming in upper level, even that national level. It is important. I have feel that that engagement of private sector is very much important, especially that their social responsibilities as well as business continuity. They can more invest on DRR, even that during the humanitarian response. Another areas I found that that media engagement. Many areas, like I'm telling that Cyclone Bulbul. In Cyclone Bulbul, one of the biggest cyclone in West Bengal and Odisha coast, but it was not attract any media because that day there was a Babri Masjid verdict. So how we can engage media effectively and how we can orient media effectively to amplify the voice of the communities, and important of response and more resources, they can play an important role. Even that some of the areas when we are doing good work in DRR, we have found many organizations are doing very innovative ideas and model demonstrations in the field. But it's important to how we can advocate, how we can jointly work to with the government, state government, so that the model can be replicated in other areas and scale up. Especially, I found I have an example like in Uttar Pradesh when I was working for the flood-prone areas where the Swachh Bharat mission was integrated in the programs, and there was a budget only 12,000 rupees, but there is a requirement more amount for that resilient toilets. So these are the areas we can think of it, even that tube wells, even that resilient platform. When we are thinking the flood and cyclone, always we are thinking for ourselves, but we need to think also that animals and cattle, those who are giving us that initial days many supports. So even that how we can activate that lakes, livestock in emergency sectors, we need to think of it also. So these are the areas we can think when we are doing a DRR and climate change interventions, and we are thinking a resilient states. Thank you, Nupur.
Thank you so much, sir. I think you very well pointed out that there is a need of ensuring effectiveness of disaster management on ground. And like you have suggested that it can be achieved through harmonized models and tools for the practitioners. And also, we agree with you that there is a need to involve private sector as well as ensure media engagement in all of these actions. And since you also mentioned about livestock, we're very pleased to share with you that we recently launched emergency multi-stakeholder coordination guidelines for livestock protection during emergencies.
Yes.
I think that we'll be disseminating widely also. So there's one step towards that goal. And I guess with that, I will move on to my next speaker. We have Mr. Anand from UNICEF with us. So you're here, right?
Yes, I'm here. I hope
Right.
I'm audible.
Yes, sir. So my question to you would be like, Assam has been continuously receiving these relentless rainfalls, and we saw the situation in the past 2 months. So we just want you to elaborate on what has been UNICEF's preparedness methodology to limit the impact and incur least casualties and displacement in the state, or you could just shed some light on what are the current response strategies that are going on.
Thanks, Nupur. Before I get into what response strategies we have adopted, it is important that we understand what is happening on the ground right now. So, this is not an isolated event that Assam is facing right now. And I have heard my previous speakers also talking about, Assam experiencing floods on an annual basis. First thing that we need to understand that flood is a very broad and very vague concept. So we cannot generalize flood happening in a particular year and compare it to the next year. See, the peculiarity is it is not yet Brahmaputra Braheli flooding in the state. Whatever we have experienced in the last 2 waves are floods generated by unprecedented rainfall mainly in the catchment area of the tributaries. So the floods have been fueled by the network of, we have a network of more than 148 rivers fueling into the Brahmaputra and Barak river system. So we need to understand that this is a very complex geography, and merely saying that this mechanism or that mechanism will solve the problem is not the solution. If we look at the adaptation report that the IPCC has released in February, many of the things are finding a place in the current situation that we are dealing with. For example, if we look at one observation that the report makes, the report says that the most vulnerable will be disproportionately affected. And that's what we are seeing. In the first wave, we have seen that the slum dwellers in Silchar city were the ones who were evacuated, and they are in the overcrowded camps because the Silchar city is not a traditionally flood prone area. And that's why there were no universal preparedness mechanisms. Those identified relief camps were themselves inundated, and there was a lack of space when people from the slums have to be evacuated as the waterlogging period increased. So, in different districts of Assam, the flooding has different peculiarity and different dimensions of challenges. So Assam is one such state which has a very robust preparedness mechanism as far as areas which are exposed to flood, which have a more frequent history of flood. But when it comes to areas which do not have a frequent history, which do not have even a recent history in the decade, you will automatically find that the systems as well as communities are caught unprepared. So the adaptation report also says that the changes in the climate anomalies are pushing the communities beyond their capacities to cope with. And this is also something that we are seeing significantly. Even the traditional coping mechanisms that communities have in frequently flood prone areas are not enabling them to deal with the situation on their own. But it is also a truth that government has been able to respond this time much better. Still, you see that Assam is fighting its own battle, and they are doing it quite well. All the stakeholders within the government and outside the government are working in a coordinated manner, and as much as possible, even within the difficult, complex circumstances, assistance is reaching to people. And there are different real-time decisions being taken by the government. So on this backdrop, if you want me to talk about how UNICEF has worked, or what was the strategy of UNICEF. So UNICEF's work is not in response to the flood. UNICEF is here, UNICEF is working with the government, and we are trying to address all the long, medium and short-term interventions that different spheres of the governance system had to incur. So we supported government in many ways. I would specifically focus on this year. So this year, for the first time, any state government in the country has introduced a system of flood preparedness scorecard. So there were 11 minimum preparedness standards, which were guided by the Interagency Standing Committee guidelines on minimum preparedness for disasters. And those standards were comprised of different indicators based on Assam Disaster Management Manual, on which districts reported. So there were 2 evaluations done, and those evaluations were supported by UNICEF, where within a period of 2 months, we have ranked districts based on their preparedness, and then based on their present score, they were supported to improve their preparedness. And because of those interventions, many systems were put into place. We have floated this idea of universal preparedness, going beyond the idea of vulnerability or exposure-driven preparedness, because this has been the history of the state. Now it is quite becoming visible, the way we have seen Dima Hasao getting affected in the first wave, the way we have seen multiple waves of flood affecting Kachar, the way we have seen districts like Hojai, Darang, Bajali, Borpeta being affected. So there are changing dimensions of floods, and to cope with it, we have introduced this system, and many indirect benefits were pushed by this flood preparedness scorecard. That is one. Second, UNICEF has supported government of Assam in implementing a digital flood reporting and information management system, first of a kind in the entire country. And as a result of that system, Assam is the only state which produces a gender and age segregated, if not age, at least there is data for women and children affected, women and children in camps, women and children including pregnant and lactating mothers, persons with disability, and all the specific details about on daily basis you will get which infrastructure, which location is being affected. So that system has also been developed with SDMA with support of UNICEF. Currently, in response to this situation, we are working with multiple partners on the ground. For example, in Kachar, we are working with Oxfam India, and we have innovated a boat-mounted water treatment unit. The water treatment units were already there, which were brought in the response to first wave of flood. But when we saw that the movement, the land movement was not possible, we have explored this way of boat-mounted water treatment units in collaboration with the DDMA, and through this we reached out to many areas. UNICEF also has a strategic partnership with NSS and NCC units. So we have been able to mobilize NSS and NCC volunteers who have supported administration in relief camp management, operation of child-friendly spaces. So this is again a unique initiative. In every camp of the state, you will find there is a separate space for children. Children are being taken care by the Anganwadi workers, by the ASHA workers, and by the teachers. Their routine interventions like growth monitoring, supplementary nutrition services are being provided. Yes, in some places still there is gap, but UNICEF backwards has worked with the department concerned, both social welfare and health department, to train their officials. We have worked with SDMA to have guidelines on relief camp management, child-friendly spaces, etc., which were pre-notified, and all those have contributed towards improvement in overall relief camp management standards, as well as inclusion of child-friendly spaces in the core of intervention. Another area that we are looking at is how do we strengthen and facilitate geo-NGO coordination. So in Barak Valley, where there was no structured presence of the IAG, we have been able to form IAG in Kachar, which is currently meeting right now. And we are trying to simulate that to other two districts in Barak Valley as well, so that the coordination at district level, where multiple stakeholders are meeting right now, is streamlined and focused on. Our other partners like Deshabandhu Club, who is now convening Kachar right now, they are also mobilizing other resources to support communities. Our partners like Rural Volunteer Center are also supporting administration now, because in last 2 days, Dhemaji and Lakhimpur have also become affected. So they are supporting in setting up of camps, operationalization of child-friendly spaces, etc. UNICEF is also looking at ways of recovery. So in the first wave, we deployed 7 teams consisting of our specialists and consultants to 7 of the most affected districts in the first wave. So our objective was to see how much of the guidelines were implemented, and there was an assessment being done, and that assessment was fed into SDM so that the second wave preparedness can take place. Unfortunately, the gap between the first wave and second wave was very tight. So some of these observations, we have again deployed three teams to cover 6 districts. One team is currently in Kachar, and other 2 teams have completed their mission. So they have done assessment of relief camp based on a predefined checklist, which is based on the government guidelines. And we are trying to do a real-time kind of first-hand checking with the government that whatever we say in terms of guideline are translated into action on field. And this is something that we are working on hand in hand with ASDMA and the line departments. We would also focus on continuity of school education. So Assam this time has taken a right decision of preponing the summer vacation to minimize the disruption in learning of children. But we have already entered into a partnership with Save the Children. We will try to see 100 fully damaged schools where we will establish temporary transitional learning centers to ensure that the learning continues even if the building is not existing. So there are many such interventions which are being done through SDMA, through line departments, through CSO partners, and even academic institutes, through which UNICEF is trying to support government and stakeholders and trying to reach the most vulnerable who are affected by floods. Over, Nupur.
Thank you, sir. I think you very rightly pointed out about the complex geography and situation in Assam, and especially the interventions that you mentioned you had under you were doing with the ASDMA, the paved way for the preparedness front as well. And my one question to you was also about the way forward, but I think more or less you have covered about that also. But briefly, in just probably in one statement or a wider or ideal perspective, like what do you see as a way forward, not just at the situation in Assam, but emerging situations in other states as well, sir?
See, again, I will go back to the IPCC report which came into February. If you read the report carefully, they would say that there is an increasing tendency within government and non-government stakeholders to buy in measures which are short-term and medium-term in nature, but ignore interventions which will ill result in longer term. What is important is to focus on how do we balance between the short term, medium term, and long term interventions. Even though the longer terms will take 10 years or 15 years time to show their result, there is a need that it should be included in the priorities. They should be talked about and they should be implemented upon. What we have worked with Government of Assam is a 10 years disaster risk reduction roadmap, which is currently with Finance Department for clearance. Once the clearance is obtained, it will be placed to the cabinet, and one of the most important feature of the roadmap is that it asks for 3% of the non-salary state budget of each department to be invested on resilience. So if we say what is the way forward, the way forward is systemic resilience reaching up to community level, and this is something that we are working with the state, and we hope that even if the movement is slow, we will see some results in the near future. And I think most of the states will have to adopt this approach, where they will have to balance between what is needed immediately versus what should be done in the longer term, so that in a cyclic way we will be able to cope with the changes that are becoming from complicated to complex every passing year. Over.
Thank you so much, sir. I think these are very pointed points that have essentially captured today's agenda. So we thank you for that and taking out time for this discussion. With that, since we are specifically talking about the situation in Assam, I would like to pose my next question to Mr. Seetha Prasad. So, sir, from you, we would like to understand that in the current context for the state of Assam, would you be able to share some of the response strategies adopted by IAG Assam and its member organizations? Over to you, sir.
Yeah. Okay, am I audible to you, Nupur?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, Nupur. It's a privilege and honor to be part of this panel discussion. And I'm representing here on behalf of IAG Assam. Also, we are a little bit grounded, and I'm also representing Northeast Affected Area Development Society based in the district of Jorhat in Upper Assam region. IAG Assam, we consist of different categories of organization, starting from local, hyper-local organization, and also national organization and international organization, also including UN agencies like UNICEF. Also, there are participation from Red Cross. Currently, the whole attention is on the vulnerable districts where severely flood is affecting a large number of population. The districts like, as Anand has mentioned, Barak Valley, the districts located in Barak Valley, then in lower part of Assam and also in the middle part of Assam. IAG is trying to connect the district IAG mechanism and also trying to activate the other member organizations who are working to save people's lives and livelihood. There are district IAG mechanism, which is functional in some of the districts, like in Majuli, like in Dhemaji, Lakhimpur, and in Borpeta. IAG Assam is trying to activate those mechanisms at the grassroots and trying to get information from the ground as well. Though the mechanism is not that visible in part of Barak Valley and the lower part of Assam and the middle part of Assam, but still trying to generate information and going with preparing seed trap in coordination with the government department. The State Disaster Management Authority, they are coming up with everyday basis seed trap. Whereas as a shadow report from the civil society organization, IAG is also coming up with rapid need assessment currently to address the immediate needs of the people, which are basic amenities like food and nutrition, basic shelter, then health, then sanitation, then all these how civil society can address along with the intervention of the government as well. So that is number one. Secondly, IAG is trying to coordinate with the member organization and trying to activate with the faster response approach with its own limitation and resources. Currently, some of the organizations who are part of IAG Assam, they have alerted activation of emergency response through START network. organization like Caritas, our organization needs, then Save the Children Action Aid, they are responding to some of the worst affected areas like in Nagaon, Dima Hasao, then in Hojai, where a large number of populations are massively affected and who are displaced and are currently taking shelter in the temporary relief camps or in the embankments or in the highland roads, and trying to save lives with basic minimum relief materials, and also transferring cash, organizing public health preparedness, then providing all sort of food and nutrition support, temporary shelter materials, NFI supports, etc., to the worst affected communities. And that is one of the strategy, reaching out to the most vulnerable and the marginalized at the moment to save more lives and livelihood of the affected communities. And going with a coordinated approach, which is one of the current strategy IIG Assam they are adopting to mobilize mechanism, to establish a mechanism in the ground. And also assessment. That is one of the crucial part of the IIG Assam member currently. The state authority, they are coming up with everyday basis CTRAP. But even though there are areas which are actually which are not represented, which are really unreached and who are really hardest hit communities, maybe they may not be included in the government report. So CSO trying to check all these areas so that all are included. There is no exclusion in the report that is taking place at the ground. So that's how trying to reach out the hardest hit communities and also reaching out to the most vulnerable in the region, in the communities. So that's the area IIG Assam is giving a focus on, and also resource mobilization. Though resource mobilization is a problem, we can see resources not actually flowing to the ground. There are organizations who are ready to work in this response, who are ready to provide services at the very emerging point of time, but there are lack of resources that is channelizing to the ground, to the organizations through crowdfunding mechanism, through support from the affected people itself. Organization, they are trying to respond with their own limited capacity. So that is one of the area IIG Assam is trying to mobilize resources, and we hope that there will be more fundings and other economic support that will be flowing to the organization like us who are working in the ground. So these are some of the current strategy IIG Assam they are adopting at the current crisis point of time to mitigate the impact of the disaster. Yeah, thank you. I would like to pause here.
Thank you, Preeta. So just hold on a moment. Like you mentioned, one of the challenges that IIG Assam is facing is resource mobilization. And you mentioned that the process for activation of organizations and IIGs and also mobilization of district IIGs has been initiated. If you can just briefly mention some of the challenges that are facing to ensure this effective coordination and mobilization of IIGs, maybe at district level, if you can shed some light on that.
One challenges we are actually coming across is like we would like to come with the joint rapid need assessment, also the rapid need assessment with immediate needs, mid-term needs and the long-term needs. We would like to have a documentation on that, but the most of the areas, critically affected areas, really it is not reachable. An organization like us who are working only in emergency response or in the operational part of a humanitarian crisis, we do not have that capacity to reach out at the moment with all these forces and mechanized effort. So maybe because of that, organizations, they are not able to fully facilitate or to fully participate in the process of joint rapid need assessment. And because of that gap, we are not able to come up with the immediate needs or the medium-term need or the long-term need that we might be requiring to address the problems and the issues in the community. So that may be number one. Second, maybe as Brother Anand, he rightly pointed out that there are areas where IIG is not visible. There are organizations, but it is not channelized or affiliated to the mechanism of state interagency group. So in that cases, especially in the Barak Valley districts, like in Karimganj, Kasar, Silchar, and the Hailakandis, also in Dima Hasao, reaching out to the unreached population, it was really a challenge for even ISA. Getting the information flow from the ground to the top, it was a challenge. So that was like misinformation was coming up to the top, and there was no reliable source of information that was coming from the ground. So that was maybe one of the challenges, flow of information from the ground and the community. It was a hindrance for ISG Assam to coordinate at that level, along with other issues like funding and resource mobilization. Yeah, I would like to pause here. Any other point?
Thank you so much. I think you very well pointed out the challenges being faced by organizations or IAGs who are responding at field level. And thank you so much for sharing that. And we'll come back to you maybe more on the specific needs in the emerging healthy area. But for now, I would like to move on to our next speaker, Mr. Miren Namdul. Sir, from you, we'd like to know that how can we develop joint actions for government NGO coordination for post-disaster relief and recovery? And how can these collaborations be effective in flood management across the country while keeping focus specific on the most affected states in India, sir?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Nupur. Thank you, Spare India, for giving me this wonderful opportunity to be part of this webinar. And respected panelist, Mr. Anil Kumar, sir, Mr. Basap Sarkar from Oxfam, and Mr. Anand from UNICEF, very good friend of us, and Mr. Tirtha Prasad Saikia from NEEDS, and all those who have joined from different places. I bring greetings from World Vision India. As I begin on those two questions which are given to me, before answering those questions, as Mr. Anand very beautifully set the context, explaining the context here in Assam. I also want to just throw a few lights on that as I try to answer those questions. First of all, this time, perhaps for the first time in the history of Assam, we have experienced this kind of disaster in a very strange manner in those districts where we never expected flood landslide. I'm basically referring to Dima Hasao district, and the way we have seen disaster happening in Dima Hasao district was really heartbreaking, and it was shocking for all of us. And for many days we were cut off. Haflong town was cut off. The Dima Hasao district was cut off. I think something very unexpected things are happening that we have seen, we have witnessed, we have experienced. And Mr. Anand rightly pointed out that this time we are facing flood in those areas where we usually don't experience flood. And I also want to take this opportunity to share that I had the opportunity of visiting some of the flood affected areas, and it was really heartbreaking to see how people are left homeless. And one of the picture I just captured and I just made it just to display, and the children standing there, they are from the relief camp, and it was really heartbreaking experience to see how children, mothers, even disabled people are taking shelter in the relief camp. And it was really encouraging to see how the ICDS department have taken the initiative to provide one-day meal in one of the relief camp that we have visited. And it was really good to see even nurses there doing their duty, even though they did not have many of the medicines that were required. And it was really good to see coordination happening from different departments coming and responding and trying to help those who are in the relief camp. And when I interacted with these 3 disabled person, they are blind men, I asked them several times, what are your needs? Because we just wanted to listen from them. And to my surprise, or I should say, this blind man opened my eyes. They said, we need nothing. We have everything. We have water, we have food, we have everything. And it was really so surprising to listen to those blind people. And that also helped me to understand that they are taken care by the people around them. And now coming back to the question that I am given, very quickly, I would like to run through the question. Now, when we talk about developing a joint action for NGOs coordination, it's not very difficult. But when we talk about GO-NGO coordination, it's very challenging. And I think we all experience challenges, even as we work, especially in the context of disaster. And some of the points that I would like to just suggest, which I have been sharing even in the past, strengthening interagency group at the state level and the district level, I think is something that we can do to be able to have a joint actions for GO and NGO better coordination. The second one is also from our experience in the Barak Valley area, we did not have a very good, strong interagency group and also a very strong NGO partner. So I think it will be good for us to think of strengthening, forming interagency group at the district level, even though they may not be prone to disaster, prone to flood. And I think what we heard from Mr. Anand is a very beautiful, wonderful initiative of initiating a formation of interagency group in Kachar and Hailagandhi and Karimganj. And the other one is the interagency group at the state level, I think maybe can provide leadership in facilitating the process. The next one that I would like to highlight is about the NGOs. There are so many good NGOs working, doing wonderful work. Even during disaster, we have seen a lot of good NGOs, a lot of grassroots NGOs are doing good work. But very unfortunately, some of the NGOs are not really connected to our interagency group or even to the ASMA or DDMA. So I think it is important for us to sensitize or maybe help those small NGOs at the grassroots level to be able to connect with the DDMA and ASMA. And the next one is NGOs and GOs to plan for the rehabilitation and reconstruction after disaster. And state level interagency group to focus more on licensing with ASMA, ASDMA, and GO government department, government agencies. I think that licensing part, I think, can be strengthened, or maybe we can just focus more. The other one is having a joint review and planning meeting with the interagency group and ASMA at the state level and also at the district level, DDMA and district level interagency group. Review and planning meeting will really help us to strengthen our response even during or before or after disaster. Post-disaster relief and recovery can be done by linking those worst affected vulnerable families. It is not only about providing relief assistance to the vulnerable families, but I think it is also important for GO and NGOs to come together and see how we can strengthen and talk about their rehabilitation and what can be done post disaster. And the other point that I have here is about GOs, NGOs. We play a very, very important role in facilitating or responding in this kind of disaster context. NGO can take lead and also support assessment. And I think we are doing that under Interagency Group Assam. We are doing the joint JRNA. So I think that is a very good initiative. And also NGO can take lead in supporting evaluation of relief recovery, and also establish, support, maintain beneficiary feedback mechanism during and after the disaster response. I think the feedback mechanism, I think, is very, very critical, and also about flood management. And the second question which is given to me, which I would like to briefly answer, is about the guiding mechanism. I think we have got a very good GO-NGO protocol and all those guidelines which we already have. And I think we can talk about construction, maintenance of relief shelters post-disaster, interagency group coordinating the relief response from all NGOs and sharing the report regularly, evacuation plans, camp management, continuation of schools, and interagency group at the state level and also district level, organizing meetings for all the NGOs, sharing findings and learnings with the larger group, and all NGOs following the guidance given by the interagency group at the state level and also district level. I think that will help us to have effective coordination, not only for Assam, but also for other states. So with this, I would like to just end, and thank you so much for this opportunity given to us. And at the end, I just want to highlight by saying that World Vision is also responding to flood here in Assam. And we are covering 9,354 families in Bilasipara block in Dhubri district. And we are going to start the distribution from this Monday. And we are covering 60 wards. And we also have assisted about 11 families here in Kamrup Metro. And we are working on some proposals, trying to get some resources so that we will be able to do more relief response in Assam. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Firstly, thank you for sharing your experiences and, of course, shedding some light on the devastating situation in Assam. And you've given us some wonderful points on how we can strengthen GO-NGO coordination. We have talked about strengthening IAG at state as well as district level, how we can sensitize and help the grassroots level NGOs and help them connect with the relevant authorities. And of course, your point on joint review and planning with IAG, that is, I think, very pertinent, especially when it comes to GO-NGO coordination. So thank you for that. And before we come back to you with some with additional questions, I would like to go back to Shri Anil Kumar Sinha, sir. Sir, I have another question for you. As we know that human development and disaster response are interlinked. My question to you would be, how can a state attempt to engage multiple stakeholders in response strategy? While some of the while Mr. Nampu has shed some light on how this coordination can be enhanced. If you could just maybe elaborate on that, sir.
Sorry, Nupur, are you asking me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, can you just repeat? I think
sir, I just want to ask you about human development and its linkages with disaster response. Like, how can a state attempt to engage multiple stakeholders in response strategies, especially coming down to the community level?
I think, no, I mentioned to you about the role of two, three institutions. One is the SDMA, the State Disaster Management Authority, and I understand Assam SDMA is quite active. It is reckoned as one of the active SDMAs. The SDMA has a big role to play in this. They are the statutory body, and they can bring together on their platform, on one side, all the concerned departments of the state government, including in case there are any central agencies there, you see, including UN organizations like UNICEF, etc. And then they should also, I would urge, I do not know the details, but I would urge Assam SDMA that NGOs and INGOs, whichever are there active, they should all be brought into that platform. That leadership, must be shown by the SDMA. You see, I think some points were mentioned about digital flood reporting, segregated data, etc. by Anand Kanu. I think it is very good of UNICEF to have come up with this. But you see, unless until these things go down to the district level, where the DDMS, the District Disaster Management Authorities, they play a big, very crucial role. One more thing which I'd like to say right here and give a message and appeal to the District Disaster Management Authorities is that while the DDMA is a statutory body because it is provided in the Disaster Management Act itself. Now, the Disaster Management Act mentions that the district magistrate will be the chairman and the chairperson of the Jila Parishad will be the co-chair. And then it mentioned 6-7 functionaries in the government, the superintendent of police, the civil surgeon, some engineers, and then I think 2 more representatives, which can be nominated by the district magistrate. But my appeal is that, you see, the law does not restrict or law does not intend that the DDMA cannot be made broad-based depending upon the need, you see. Now, if there is a need, then at the district level, clearly there is a need, you see, because a lot of organizations are, going and working at the district level, and coordination always remains a big problem. Say, GO-NGO coordination was mentioned by Anand Kanu also, and I suppose every speaker refers to that, and that is something at the center of working together, where the government agencies and NGOs, INGOs, UN agencies, they are all there. Private sector was also mentioned, which is a very good point, I missed, you see. Normally, I don't miss that. But in case there are private sector, and I would say that, you see, when we talk of private sector, let us not think only of Tatas and Birlas and Ambanis. In the private sector, there are district level. In Bihar, I remember 30-40 years back when I used to work in the district, that Jila Stadiya Vyapar Mandali, jo traders hote hain at the district level, they have associations. So they should also be involved. A lot of things, continuity of the economic activities are provided by the local traders, not the big private sector players, which are at the national, international level, you see. Even if they are sending something, I think the role of the local level traders and those associations, they become very, very important. So my specific request at the district level, even at the state level, and I think it is for the SDMA to take a lead and advise the DDMAs that do not restrict the membership of the DDMA to only those members which are mentioned in the law, you see. Law does mention some, you see, because law is always indicative. Law is not very exhaustive, you see. Law provides a basic framework. And then it says that, okay, this is the framework based on which you work, you see. So I think people have to marry that provision of framework in the law with the realities and the practical situation in the field. And therefore, my experience has been, and my appeal is that kindly make the DDMAs very broad-based as possible. You include educational institutions, you include schools, you include colleges, you include civil defense, you include NCC, etc., because you need a lot of volunteers and youngsters, etc. So all that I would say, they should be included. This helps not only in coordination, bringing various players on the same platform, but also, appreciating each other's role and then evolving a integrated, composite kind of an approach to deal with a problem which exists over there. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. And I agree with you, and especially the point of getting private actors on board, especially at district and local level, that can be a very, very crucial thing in the long term. And you've also mentioned about it can enhance coordination, but then there's a factor about inclusion also. And towards the inclusivity thing, my next question would be to Mr. Vasant Sarkar. So my question to you would be that what are the challenges on ground in making flood response strategies inclusive of socio-economically marginalized and vulnerable groups?
Nupur, just one thing.
Sure.
Sorry for this. You see, I have got an appointment with a doctor at 5 o'clock.
Okay.
So another 5 minutes or so, I will be leaving. So I won't
Sure.
like to disturb at that moment. So I will be here for a couple of minutes and then permit me to leave, you see.
Right. Oh, thank you.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, and Nupur.
Vasant sir.
And yes, before going to that areas, that inclusion, that is very important areas. But as Anil Sarji already shared about that government role of government, but there is a important role of humanitarian actors, those who are in the ground. Especially, we are doing several humanitarian response in different parts of India, even that organizations, those are in the states. But we should need to look back in our systems. If I see that, if I check myself, are they in our organization contingency plan is ready or updated? Are we ready with that contingency preposition? Are we ready with influencing donor for emergency fund for immediate support before getting any fund from institution or corporates? Is there a SOP ready for its staff? Are we able to share rapid assessment within 24 hours? My organization is ready for response in 72 hours? Are we able to coordinate with the SDMA, DDMA, even that donors, institutional donors like UNICEF, even that intelligence group and Spare India? These are the areas I think we need to look into in ourselves for better preparedness for effective and efficient response. And while go to the field in the ground, it is very important that integrated way of response, even that inclusive way of response. And for that inclusive of inclusions, there is very much important as Anand and Anand and Anand shared that gender disaggregated data is very much important, where we can understand that the need of the special peoples, especially that most vulnerable sections, person with disabilities, old age, special child. So we need to identify. Identification is the one of the most area we need to identify, and there is a challenges also. Even that it will be very easy to for safe and equitable access, the humanitarian access to the special peoples, and definitely this leads to building resilience, strengthen the capacity and leadership. I could remember that when I was in Kerala response, we have identified a group of person with disabilities, where we have after in the rehabilitation stages, we have trained them and support them that already they are doing on the business, that paper cutting business and books binding business, and they are doing very good till date now. So important the identification, support, and linking with that the departments, different departments. I could remember that we could remember linking with them that Kudumusri groups in Kerala, so that they could able to get more fund for their own business, and definitely that their own economic sustainability and building resilience. And definitely another areas is coordination. And not only that, all departments, even that different challenged people like old age, disabled people, we should coordinate and complement each other. There is a role of definitely will take support from the intelligence group and the state disaster management authorities. And we need to understand the learnings after the emergency, after the response. We are doing, we are linking with the relief, rehabilitation, and development programs. We need to identify the challenges and learnings, good practices, and their indigenous knowledges and capacities. This learning can help improve way to humanitarian response in futures. Definitely, we need to sharing the learnings in larger audience for their experience, also that further more support. It is important to support to human resources. More sufficient and capacitated human resource and staff is definitely required in such interventions, and definitely the resource management required to additional budget for park and to access and provide the services to that most vulnerable sections and marginalized people. Definitely they share the information to the people with disabilities, old age people, and provide them the opportunity for their feedback also important. So this coordinated approach and inclusive way, we can reach to the most vulnerable sections, excluded sections, those who are maybe that they are not getting chance to participate, they are not getting that equitable access. Thank you, Nupur.
Thank you so much, sir. And I think you very well elaborated on the point of coordinating and complementing efforts for various vulnerable groups, and of course the need of documenting the challenges, learnings, good practices, and feedback to inform the further planning down the line. And of course, thank you so much for elaborating on the role as well as preparedness of humanitarian organizations and need to look within themselves for their organizational capacities and systems and the SOPs which are in place. So thank you for sharing on that and elaborating on that, sir. And with that, and looking at the time, I think I'll go to Mr. Tirtha Prasad for my last question, as we have been discussing about the situation in Assam. So from you, I would like to, if you could just briefly shed some light on the emerging medium and long-term needs of the affected people in the state of Assam.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you, Nupur. Again, already I have shared that as interagency group, we are not in a position okay, sorry. Okay. From interagency group, though we are not in a position to undertake the joint rapid need assessment at the moment because of multiple challenges in the ground. In our observation and in our watch in the relief camps or in the severely affected communities, the need of the current need is food and nutrition. Obviously, government, they are providing food in terms of this public distribution system. But when we talk about the nutritious food and the balanced diet, there is a lack on that. And especially the food, baby food, which is actually one of the crucial requirements in the relief camps, that actually support need to be there. And food security also, it should include nutrition as well in the relief camps as well as in severely affected communities while providing support to them, and cash support. For the last 2 to 3 weeks in some of the districts like in Dorong or in Nagaon or in Hojai or in Kachar, Nolbaris and all, people, they are not in a position to go for work, earning money. And that's why the earning scope is completely in halt. For that, there is a high need of providing cash support to them to boost their economic support in their own family level. And also temporary shelter materials. Those families who are residing in the embankment, those who are residing in the roadside, those who are residing in the high-rise platform, there is lack of temporary shelter materials. For that, actually, we need to provide with the support of temporary shelter materials with NFI, non-food items. One of the very vital needs in the relief camp is the sanitation and the drinking water system. The other day, one of my colleagues, he was going to distribute relief item in Kampur circle of Nagaon district, where he has seen that one mother is keeping taru leaf for defecating children, for use of defecating in the children, and where it was completely unhygienic situation. Children are living with, and women and other adolescent girls, they are coexisting with all these hazardous situation. That will create another disaster, I think, if we do not take preparedness on that. At the moment, the cleanliness of the village, this is also another hour of the need. Those families who are returning to the family, returning to their shelter, returning to their village, the cleanliness need to be undertaken. Support for education materials to children, those who lost their education materials, school bags, school books, notebooks, and all. These support need to be extended to children who lost everything in the current wave of flooding. Then protection of women and children, especially in the relief camps. Also psychosocial support, I think that is one of the ignored area for most of the humanitarian actors like us. We need to give intervention in that, and support for livestock. Another area which need actually attention, because for many days, almost for 3 to 4 weeks, livestock like cattle, buffalo, they are not able to eat the proper food they supposed to have. So it's a huge loss the family they are going to face because of loss of livestock. So these are some of the immediate needs, and in the medium term needs, what you observe is that the work specifically in early recovery of livelihood, that will be one of the essential area to generate livelihood and income opportunity, especially among the farmers or the wage earners who depend on the native livelihood scope in the ground. Also early recovery, restoration of shelter. There are a lot of shelters which is really under assessment and fully damaged shelter and the partially damaged shelter. They need actually restoration support so that the normalcy continues with their own shelter. For that, special plan and programs may be developed, maybe from the CSO or maybe from the government side as well. Even the government is coming with some compensation packages for those who are displaced because of loss of shelters and all. Then rebuilding schools, one of the area where we need to give focus on, because thousands of schools are defunct and it is severely affected. And because of that, in the flooding of 2020, it was more than 15,000 schools already affected because of flood. Now maybe the number will be more bigger than that, because this year already community they are affected to 3 waves of flooding in Assam. Then repairing and retrofitting of community infrastructure, assets, connectivity, all these will be very important. These are all hardware investment. We need to really ensure that government, they are providing systemic support and other resilient plans to take it up. And public health preparedness, one of the area where we have to give high focus in the medium term intervention, and also advocacy with the other government policies and plan and the development schemes. In the long term need, definitely the livelihood intervention will be very important, targeting the worst affected communities in the ground. Also our advocacy effort also need to be continued to mainstream other resources, other schemes and policies for the people who are really in need of support from the government as well. And also the trust need to be also in risk management, also in flood preparedness, and also the training and capacity building need to be undertaken, targeting the poor and the poorest, targeting the highly vulnerable and the highly marginalized groups. And also the trust need to also be continued with crisis anticipation. We need to be, as civil society organization, we need to get ready with crisis anticipation and anticipatory action, so that the similar situation we do not face repeatedly in the days to come. These can be some of the areas where we can give trust upon, and we can try mitigating these impacts with our own resources, or maybe by advocating with the government and other agencies in a multi-stakeholder approaches. So I'd like to pause here again. Thank you, Nupur. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. We're really grateful for you that you could join us today and share some of the on-ground situation with us. And we, being a national platform, will be taking the points that you've shared. We'll be deciding an advocacy agenda around that, and we'll be taking this going forwards and taking it to other stakeholders as well. And we thank you for that. Looking at the time, I do not think we'll be able to take up question and answers. So I think we will now close the session for today. And I would again like to thank all of the speakers who could join us for today's session. We have Mr. Anil Kumar Sinhaji, Mr. Masib Sarkar, Mr. Narun Milen Nampui, Mr. Preet Prasad, and also Mr. Anand, who will be briefly join us to share updates from the UNICEF. We're really grateful that you could join us for today's session. And of course, the recording will be accessible to all on our YouTube channel, and we'll also be sharing the report with all stakeholders shortly. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
So much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Bye.